At the Helsinki summit yesterday, President Trump embarrassed our country. He undermined American values and openly sided with Russia's authoritarian leader, Vladimir Putin, against the U.S. intelligence community's unanimous assessment that Russia interfered in our 2016 presidential election. John McCain is right when he says it was, and I quote, one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president in memory. The damage inflicted by President Trump's naivete, egotism, false equivalence, and sympathy for autocrats is difficult to calculate. But it is clear that the summit in Helsinki was a tragic mistake, end quote. That's not Bernie Sanders. That is former Republican presidential candidate, Senator John McCain of Arizona. Today, after a strong international backlash, Trump, in a bizarre statement, claimed he misspoke and, of course, blamed the media for reporting what he said. Even now, he could not help but suggest that the electoral interference, quote, could be other people also, end quote, and not just Russia. Today, we face an unprecedented situation of a president who, for whatever reason, refuses to acknowledge an attack on American democracy. Either he really doesn't understand what has happened, or he is under Russian influence because of compromising information they may have on him, or because he is ultimately more sympathetic to Russia's authoritarian, oligarchic form of society than he is to American democracy. Whatever the reason, Congress must act, and must act now, to demand that the President of the United States represent the interest of the American people and not Russia. Let us be clear. Russia has been meddling not only in U.S. elections, but in the elections of other democracies, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, to name just a few. Russia's goal is to advance its own interests by weakening the transatlantic alliances of democracies that arose after World War II, while also inflaming internal divisions in each of these countries. We should also be clear that this interference is directed from the very highest levels of the Russian government. Last week, Special Counsel Robert Mueller announced a set of indictments of 12 members of Russia's military intelligence service, the GRU. There can be no doubt that, given the nature of Russian government, Vladimir Putin was directly involved in this effort. But our concern is not only what has already happened, it is what could happen in the future. Last week, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, a former Republican senator, raised the alarm on growing cyber attack threats against the U.S. in a range of areas, including federal, state, and local government agencies, the military, business, and academia, saying the situation is at a quote-unquote critical point. He said Russia is, quote, the most aggressive foreign actor, no question, and they continue their efforts to undermine our democracy, end of quote. Coates compared the warning signs to those the United States faced ahead of the September 11th terrorist attacks. This is a clear and present threat to our democratic system and those of our allies. Ultimately, of course, we want a peaceful relationship with Russia. We do not want a return to the Cold War, and we surely do not seek conflict. But at the same time, we must be very clear that we oppose what Putin is doing, both in terms of his foreign policy and his domestic policy. On foreign policies, we will not accept Russian meddling in the elections of democratic countries, stoking political tensions by promoting hatred and suspicion of immigrants and minorities, and trying to undermine long-standing alliances between democratic allies. In 2014, in violation of international law, Russia invaded neighboring Ukraine and annexed the Crimea region. Russia has assassinated political opponents abroad, most recently through the use of poison in Salisbury, England, on a former spy and his daughter, a chemical attack that endangered the lives of many, many civilians. The British government concluded that this atrocious attack was likely carried out by Russia's military intelligence service. Domestically, Putin has undermined democracy in Russia, crushing free speech, jailing political opponents, harassing and assassinating journalists who criticize him, and increasing persecution of ethnic and religious minorities and the LGBT community. President Trump had an opportunity to speak out on all of these issues, to confront Putin about these destabilizing and inhumane policies, but he chose not to. Well, Mr. President, if the President of the United States is not going to do it, Congress must. The Congress must make it clear that we accept the assessment of our intelligence community with regard to Russian election meddling in our country and in other democracies. The Congress must move aggressively to protect our election system from interference by Russia or any foreign power, and work closely with our democratic partners around the world to do the same. The Congress must demand that the sanctions against Russia that were passed last year be fully implemented. The Congress must make it clear that we will not accept any interference with the ongoing investigation of Special Counsel Mueller, such as the offer of preemptive pardons or the firing of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and that the President must cooperate with this investigation. And finally, the Congress must make it clear to President Trump that his job is to protect the values that millions of Americans struggled, fought, and died to defend, the values of democracy, justice, and equality. Tweets, comments, and press conferences are fine, but we need more from Republican senators now. It is time for the Senate to rein in the president's dangerous behavior. If their leadership won't allow votes on dealing with this extraordinarily important matter, then my Republican colleagues must join with Democrats to make it happen, or all of their words are worthless. President, I yield the floor.